The great halls of St. Peter's Basilica had seen centuries of reverence, but never anything like this. Beneath the golden ceilings and towering saints, where the soft chant of morning echoed through marble corridors, a single, inexplicable sight stopped the world cold. There, beside the coffin of Pope Francis, lay a dog. It wasn't barking, it wasn't begging for food or attention. It simply lay there, curled gently, its head resting against the carved wood as if grieving the loss of someone it had loved for a lifetime. Mourners stood still, some in disbelief, others in quiet tears. Cameras didn't flash. Phones weren't raised. Even the guards seemed afraid to breathe too loud, as though any movement might disturb something sacred. The dog didn't wear a collar. It didn't belong to anyone, and yet it acted as though it belonged there more than anyone else. Soon, murmurs slipped through the hushed basilica like wind through ancient pillars. Whose dog is that? Did it belong to the Pope? How did it get in here? The Vatican security staff, always meticulous, were at a complete loss. They reviewed footage. Nothing. No doors opened. No gates breached. It was as though the dog had simply appeared, or had always been there. Some priests claimed they saw it enter. Others swore they hadn't. But one thing was certain. No one had the heart to remove it. Even the Swiss guard, known for their strict protocols, stepped back, allowing the creature to stay right where it had chosen to be. Why did the dog come? And more hauntingly, how did it know? Some dismissed it as coincidence. Others whispered of something divine. Theologians debated, yet the people wept, not just for their beloved Pope, but for the unshakable loyalty now lying silently beside him. Then came the moment. The moment that would go on to shake the Vatican to its very foundation. Because what happened next couldn't be explained by theology nor reason nor science. It simply was. And it silenced even the holiest men. In a world that often celebrates power with noise and wealth with spectacle, Pope Francis chose silence. He had no interest in marble statues or gilded tributes. He rejected grand ceremonies, parades, and chants in his name. Instead, in his final days, he asked only for prayer. No gold, no titles, just prayer. He spent his last nights not in a lavish papal bed, but in a simple room, lit by a small wooden cross and the quiet flicker of a candle. He whispered his prayers not from a pulpit, but from the edge of his bed, where he knelt with trembling knees and closed eyes. To those around him, he gave gentle nods of gratitude, never asking for attention, only blessing those who came to say goodbye. Even in weakness, he smiled, not out of joy, but as a final gesture of peace, a silent message. All is well. His final wish, written in his own hand, was short and clear. No monuments, no statues. Only let my life be remembered in acts of mercy. There was no televised farewell, no public declarations, just a whisper, and then a stillness. And in that stillness, the world felt the weight of losing not just a pope, but a father, a shepherd, a humble man of God. As his body was prepared for burial, memories rushed through the minds of billions across the globe. But more than anything, people remembered his kindness, a kind of rare, raw compassion that broke protocol and melted walls. He had dined with the homeless, washed the feet of prisoners, held the hands of the dying, and kissed the foreheads of children in war zones. But what most had forgotten, until now, was his deep love for animals. Long before the Vatican, when he was still Jorge Bergoglio in Argentina, he was known to rescue stray dogs and feed birds outside his church. He once stopped a convoy for a limping puppy and carried it all the way to the monastery. To him, they were not animals. They were creatures of God's heart. A soul with fur, he once joked to a young child holding a kitten, and sometimes more loyal than men in robes. His homilies weren't always filled with doctrine. Sometimes he spoke of the voiceless, the forgotten, the discarded, the speechless beings who loved with pure hearts and asked for nothing in return. He had said more than once, "Heaven will not feel complete to me without the ones who loved me without words." And so, when a dog came to mourn at his coffin, some began to wonder, was this grief from earth or a goodbye from heaven? It began as an unexplainable moment inside the sacred silence of St. Peter's Basilica. The mourners sat still, heads bowed, wrapped in sorrow. But then, something shifted. A quiet presence emerged at the far end of the hall. A lone dog, medium in size with a dusty ash-colored coat and piercing eyes, had somehow made its way past every guard, every barricade, every watchful eye. Not a single person saw how it had entered. There were no open doors, no alerted guards, no signs of intrusion. It simply appeared, walking slowly but purposefully down the grand marble aisle. The air grew heavy with astonishment. The dog didn't hesitate, didn't pause to look around or sniff its surroundings. It walked straight toward Pope Francis's coffin, as if it had always known the way. And when it reached the casket, it gently laid down, rested its head against the wood and closed its eyes, not as a lost animal, but as a loyal soul who had come home. The Basilica staff and Vatican security were immediately thrown into confusion. Panic whispered through earpieces as guards stepped forward to assess the situation. No animal was allowed inside, especially not during such a sacred, high-security ceremony. A guard cautiously approached, trying to coax the dog away. But the moment his hand neared, the dog let out a low, sorrowful growl, not angry, but deeply protective. Then it began to cry, soft, drawn-out whimpers that echoed off the ancient walls, piercing deeper than any spoken word could. When a second guard reached for it, the dog pressed itself tighter against the coffin, as if refusing to be separated from someone it dearly loved. For a long moment, everyone froze. The cardinals exchanged glances, unsure of what to make of this uncanny, sacred protest. And then one elderly cardinal, tears welling in his eyes, softly said what no one had dared to voice, "Let it be." The guards stepped back. The dog stayed, not as an intruder, but as part of the mourning itself. It wasn't long before someone among the mourners took out their phone. A single photograph, the grieving dog resting beside the late Pope, was shared on social media. Within hours, it ignited the internet. The image went viral with hashtags like "You Vatican Dog," "Mourning Soul," and "Silent Farewell." People across the globe began to share it, pray over it, cry because of it. News agencies rushed to report what they were calling the most moving moment of the Pope's farewell. Reporters from every continent arrived in Vatican City, hoping to witness the phenomenon themselves. Pilgrims began flooding in, not just to pay respects to the Pope, but to see the dog who had somehow touched the divine. Some wept at the sight. Others knelt beside it and whispered prayers. In that silent creature, they didn't just see mourning. They saw loyalty, purity, and a divine mystery that no doctrine could explain. The sound of rain tapping against the cobblestones echoed through the narrow alleyways of Buenos Aires. It was a quiet, ordinary evening, one that might have passed unnoticed in the grand tapestry of life, had it not been for the small, fragile form lying in the shadows. There, in the rain-soaked darkness, was a dying puppy, its fur matted and soaked, its eyes dull with pain. Jorge Bergoglio, who would later become Pope Francis, was just a young man back then, a simple priest dedicated to helping those in need. But that evening, he found himself drawn to the small creature, abandoned by the world. Without a moment's hesitation, he scooped the trembling puppy into his arms, sheltering it from the cold rain. As he gazed down at the tiny animal, he felt a deep sense of compassion stir within him. "You're going to be all right, Jorge," whispered softly. not knowing if the puppy would make it through the night. He took it back to his modest home, where he cared for it tenderly, feeding it, nursing it back to health. And as the days passed, he gave the puppy a name, Luz, meaning light in Spanish. Little did he know, this humble creature would become more than just a pet. Luz would become a beacon of companionship and love in Jorge's life, even during the darkest times. As the years went by, the bond between Jorge and Luz grew unshakable. Wherever Jorge went, Luz was there, walking faithfully by his side. It was as though the two were connected by something deeper than mere friendship. Jorge would pray with Luz, offering the faithful companion a seat beside him as he meditated on God's word. On evenings when the weight of the world seemed too much to bear, Jorge would sit quietly and read aloud from the scriptures, with Luz curled up at his feet. Their companionship was simple yet profound, a silent promise of loyalty and unconditional love. Luz wasn't just a dog, Luz was a confidant. In the solitude of his vocation, when Jorge felt alone, Luz provided comfort. His presence reminded Jorge that there was still light in the world, that even in times of uncertainty, love remained. The two of them shared a bond that spoke volumes without needing words. It was a love that transcended species, a love that was pure and untainted by the world's complexities. But, as fate would have it, the world had greater plans for Jorge. When he was elected as Pope, everything changed. The man who had dedicated his life to service now found himself at the helm of the Catholic Church. The Vatican's rules were clear: no pets allowed. As much as it pained Jorge to do so, he knew what he had to do. Luz, his faithful companion, was left behind in Buenos Aires. He had no choice. The walls of the Vatican would not allow a dog to roam freely through the corridors. As Jorge boarded the plane to Rome, he turned to the memory of Luz one last time, whispering a promise through tears. "If God allows, I'll see you again." It was a promise made with the hope that one day, somehow, fate would allow them to reunite. But in the heart of the Vatican, as Jorge rose to the papacy, Luz was forgotten, or so it seemed. The day passed into evening, but the dog remained, unmoving, silent, as though time had no meaning for it. The basilica was still, save for the soft murmurs of those who had gathered to mourn. The dog's presence beside Pope Francis's coffin was more than just a moment of quiet grief. It was a testament to loyalty that transcended understanding. It didn't look for food or water, nor did it stir from its spot. It simply lay there, its head resting gently on the edge of the casket, its body pressed against the wood as though it had been waiting for this moment, its entire life. No one could explain it, but everyone could feel it. The sorrow, the love, the bond that was palpable in the air. Mourners, too, overcome with emotion to speak, gathered around the scene in hushed reverence. The dog didn't belong to anyone in the room, but it felt as if it belonged to everyone. It was as if Luz, the dog that Jorge had loved so much, had returned to fulfill a promise. Not just to him, but to all who had known the true meaning of love and sacrifice. The sight of the dog, still by the coffin, stirred something deep within those who witnessed it. Eyes filled with tears, and shoulders shook with quiet sobs. For some, it was as though the dog had become a physical embodiment of the grief they all felt. That silent, unspoken sorrow that can only be felt, never explained. An elderly woman, watching the scene with trembling hands, whispered in a voice thick with emotion, "That dog knows more love than most of us ever will." Her words rippled through the crowd, causing many to pause and reflect. Here was a creature, incapable of speech, yet somehow it spoke more clearly than anyone ever could. The love it showed, the devotion it embodied, was a reminder that the purest forms of love often don't require words. The dog didn't mourn because it had lost a master. It mourned because it understood, in the deepest sense, what it meant to love with your entire being. As the hours passed, The rumors began. Whispers circulated from one mourner to the next, spreading like wildfire. "Is this the same dog?" they asked in disbelief. Could this be Luz? Could this be the very same puppy that Jorge Bergoglio had saved so many years ago, now sitting beside the coffin of the man who had become Pope? How could it have found its way here, to this holy space, to this very moment? Was it fate? Was it something more divine? Some speculated that the dog had simply followed the Pope's path, crossing continents, defying the odds to find its way to Rome. Others marveled at how the dog seemed to know where to go, how it had entered without a sound, how it had instinctively chosen to mourn beside the coffin of the man who had once been its companion. No one could explain it, but everyone felt the weight of it. How could something so small, so simple, possess such a profound connection to the heart of the man who had once cared for it? The night grew still as the Vatican's prayer service began, a quiet, sacred ritual that had taken place countless times before. The cardinals, in their humble robes, gathered around the coffin of Pope Francis, their voices rising in prayer. The basilica echoed with the deep, solemn chants that resonated through the centuries, their tone filled with reverence for the man who had dedicated his life to service. But amid the reverence, something unexpected began to happen. The dog, still lying by the coffin, remained motionless, its eyes fixed on the casket. For a moment, it appeared as though the world had paused, waiting, and then, as if responding to some unseen force, the lights in the basilica flickered, casting strange, fleeting shadows across the walls. The sound of the organ playing a single note by itself broke the silence, a deep, resonating sound that filled the grand hall. It wasn't the hands of the musicians, but something else, something beyond explanation. The cardinals halted mid-prayer, their eyes widening in disbelief. The room grew cold, as though touched by the hand of something beyond human understanding. The dog's stillness became even more profound, as if it too had felt the shift in the atmosphere. Then, in a moment that would be forever etched in the memories of those present, the dog stirred. Slowly it raised one paw, and with careful, deliberate movement, it placed it gently on the Pope's coffin. A collective gasp echoed through the basilica. There was something so poignant, so heartbreaking about the gesture. It wasn't just a dog mourning the loss of a master. It was a creature that had come home, as if finally understanding its place in the grand tapestry of life. The dog's paw rested there, soft yet unwavering, as though offering a final act of devotion to the man who had once called it Luz. Then, in that eerie silence, the faint rustle of paper could be heard. A cardinal, his voice trembling, unfolded a letter that had been found near the coffin. The room, thick with anticipation, fell into a hushed quiet as he began to read aloud. "2. Lose my light. If you find me again, know that I never stopped loving you." The words were simple, yet they carried with them the weight of years, the weight of a man who had loved a small puppy with all his heart, and a small puppy who had never forgotten that love. The letter, a final message of connection, of trust, of unconditional affection, was a gift beyond words. It was a confirmation of the bond they had shared, a bond that had not ended with distance or time. The letter was his final gift to Luz, an offering of love that transcended death itself. As the words hung in the air, the dog let out a single, soft howl. It was a sound that broke through the hearts of everyone present. Not a mournful cry, but a gentle, soulful sound that seemed to reverberate in the very walls of the basilica. The sound was a recognition, a mourning, and yet, in its depth, it felt like a release, a final farewell, a moment of peace. The howl filled the air, and in that instant, the Vatican, the holiest place on earth, fell silent. Every person in the room understood that something extraordinary had just taken place. The miracle that had occurred that night could not be explained, but it didn't need to be. The bond between Pope Francis and Luz, a bond of love, loyalty, and faith, had transcended the earthly realm and reached the heavens, forever sealing their connection. As the dog's howl echoed through the vast cathedral, it became a sound of hope, of eternal love, and of the unbreakable bond between man and creature. The Vatican, known for its strict traditions and protocols, was changed forever after that unforgettable night. As the world witnessed the emotional farewell between Pope Francis and his devoted dog, the cardinals and clergy understood that something sacred had occurred. The dog, once a mysterious stranger, had become a symbol of the love and faith that transcended human understanding. It was not just a pet, it was a guardian spirit, silently watching over the Pope's legacy. In a rare and unprecedented declaration, the Vatican officially allowed the dog to remain on the grounds. It would now be known as the silent protector of the Pope's spirit. It was as if the very air of St. Peter's Basilica had been blessed by the presence of Luz. Visitors would now come, not only to pay homage to Pope Francis, but also to witness the miraculous bond between man and animal, a bond so pure and profound that it left even the holiest of men in awe. The dog's presence became a silent, constant reminder that love knows no boundaries, no limitations, and no end. It would stay by the tomb, guarding the spirit of the Pope, offering its quiet protection and unwavering devotion. And for those who visited, its peaceful demeanor was a reminder that love, whether between a man and his dog or between humankind and the divine, never truly dies. As the weeks passed, Luz's health began to decline. It had spent days, months, even years standing guard, watching over the Pope's resting place, offering its quiet presence to all who entered the basilica. But the dog, who had once been so full of life, had grown tired. It had witnessed its master's passing, had mourned in ways words could never describe, and had found its peace in the sanctuary of the place that had once been home. One peaceful morning, Luz lay down by the tomb, its once bright eyes now dimmed by age. The dog rested as if waiting for the final call of the divine, its heart at peace, surrounded by the hum of the basilica and the silent prayers of those who still came. To pay tribute, Luz quietly passed away, its last breath a soft whisper in the sacred air. In honor of the bond shared between Pope Francis and the dog, Luz was buried symbolically beside the Pope's resting place. The Vatican had made sure that the final resting spot of this extraordinary creature was a place of reverence. It was as though the circle of love had been completed. Luz had given its loyalty, its love, and its spirit to the Pope, and now it would rest beside him for all eternity. The tomb of Pope Francis and Luz became a place of pilgrimage for those who believed in the power of faith, love, and loyalty. It was a testament to the unspoken bonds that could form between human and animal, bonds that were as strong and as eternal as any between two souls. As time passed, the story of the dog that mourned beside the Pope's coffin became more than just a story. It became a legend, whispered through the corridors of the Vatican, told by pilgrims and visitors who had witnessed the miracle. In memory of Luz, a plaque was placed near the tomb. The inscription read, "Here lies the one who loved silently and was loved beyond words." It was a simple inscription, but one that carried the weight of profound meaning. It was a tribute to a dog who had been more than just a companion. It had been a symbol of pure, undying love. Luz's journey from a small, dying puppy to a silent guardian at the heart of the Vatican was a story that touched the hearts of all who heard it. The plaque became a place for visitors to reflect on the nature of love, how it can transcend death, time, and space, and how it can come in the most unexpected forms. The legend of Luz would never fade. It would live on in the hearts of those who had witnessed its final act of devotion, in the whispers of those who spoke of the miracle that had silenced the Vatican, and in the quiet presence of the dog that had loved its master so completely. In The sacred halls of the Vatican, where tradition and protocol reigned supreme, the presence of Luz defied every rule and expectation. Here, among the holiest of places, where only the most revered figures had access, a humble dog had found its way into the hearts of the faithful. No one could explain it, and perhaps that was the point. Luz had no titles, no accolades. It was simply a dog, yet it became a symbol of something much greater than any title or position could ever signify. It was a reminder that love, in its purest form, knows no bounds. It doesn't follow rules. It doesn't respect boundaries. It simply exists, unconditionally, and with unwavering faith. Luz's devotion to Pope Francis transcended all human understanding. In the most sacred place on earth, a dog had shown humanity the power of love that exists without expectation or condition. Even in the most sacred halls, love had no protocol, no script to follow. Luz had proven that love speaks louder than any tradition, louder than any title or hierarchy. In the silence beside the Pope's coffin, Luz's devotion was a prayer in itself, a prayer more powerful than words could ever express. Have you ever loved someone so deeply, so purely, that even death couldn't silence you? Luz's journey is a reminder of how love can transcend time, place, and even death itself. It reminds us that there are moments in life when our hearts speak in ways words never could. When we experience love in its truest form, we often find ourselves doing the unthinkable. Luz did not just mourn. It demonstrated loyalty, faith, and love that are rarely seen in the world today. A love so strong, so profound, that it silenced even the most powerful people in the holiest of places. It's a question we must all ask ourselves. Are we capable of such love? And if we are we brave enough to let it speak, even in silence? If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to show your love. Like, share, and comment with a heart. Share Luz's story with the world, because love like this needs to be celebrated and remembered. And always remember, sometimes the loudest prayers have pause.